Hello, and welcome to the Red Pencil here at the Creative Academy. This is our opportunity to go through your queries and give you some feedback in terms of what's working, what you might want to focus on, and any suggestions we have for improvement. My name's Eileen Cook, and I am here today with my fine colleagues, Crystal and Donna. All right, we have today a query for a YA novel from a Creative Academy member, Angela Post. And I wonder, Donna, would you be so kind as to just read the query for us?
Yep, absolutely. All right. Dear Taylor Haggerty, I enjoyed meeting you at Surrey International Writers Conference in 2017. I've written a young adult manuscript called In the Shadow of a Thousand Generations. The word count is over 42,000 words. I read in your manuscript wish list that you like to represent books that are unexpected, clever, funny, and twisty. Also, that you enjoy books about found family. I believe my book fits these descriptors. The protagonist not only finds family from 2,000 years in the past, but also family from the future. 17-year-old Lelia, searching for her biological family, must travel to the past to save them all from a fatal hereditary disease. She must journey to ancient Pompeii to rescue a slave girl that never should have perished when Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD. In order to succeed in her mission, she must enlist the help of a relative from the future. I've been enthralled with the idea of Pompeii since childhood. The typical images that come up on a Google search of Pompeii are photos of body casts and a focus on how people died when Mount Vesuvius erupted. I want to portray a sense of how the people lived at that time in a way that is engaging. For example, the love interest of the protagonist is a resident of ancient Pompeii, and he is completely unaware of how patriarchal his society is in 79 AD. In contrast, refugees and immigrants are welcomed, assimilated, and given Roman citizenship much more easily than the current experiences of many in our world today. I'm a psychologist, and I've worked with university students from over 50 countries. These students have taught me about their worldviews and experiences of cultural transition. The protagonist returns to a time where she has to grapple with issues of the day, such as slavery, patriarchy, assimilation of diverse cultures, and abandoned babies. It is extreme culture shock for Lalia. I've attended the Surrey International Writers Conference for the past 5 years. I'm a member of SCBWI and attended their winter conference in New York in 2014. I wrote a winning story for the Storytellers Contest at Surrey International Writers Conference 2016. Diana Gabaldon and Jack White were the judges in this competition. I was longlisted in the Canada Writes Creative Nonfiction competition in 2017 and have recently won a second place prize in the Royal City Literary Arts Society Writing Contest. Thank you, Taylor, for reading my submission. I hope to hear from you. Sincerely, Angela Post.
Thank you, Donna. So I want to dive into this because I definitely have some thoughts on this. I've been working on query letters recently with people, so I have all sorts of thoughts. But I'm just going to kind of break it down into a couple of different chunks. So I'm going to start with kind of that first paragraph, and I'm curious if either of you have any thoughts that you wanted to add to that.
I'm always a little bit torn when you've met somebody at a conference, but a couple of years have gone by before you're submitting about whether you want to tag that date or not tag that date. And I guess it depends. Did you just meet them or did they ask you to submit? Because those are very different things. If you met them and that was great, then that's kind of one thing. But if they asked you to submit, then you really want to highlight that. But I'm not sure, how everybody else feels about that. But that was something that immediately kind of jumped out at me because by the time this is sent out, it'll probably be 2019. So then you're looking at like a 2-year gap in that date. I don't know if that's a flag or not. So be curious to hear.
I don't know if it's a flag, but I don't know if it's a benefit. And I think that's really a lot of my suggestions for this whole piece with Angela is looking at how do you get the biggest bang for the buck on the space that you have? Because you have such a small amount of space. And so whether or not meeting her at Surrey in 2017 is the big bonus with this piece, I don't think it necessarily hurts to mention that we met before. My two big things that I wanted to raise in this paragraph is a lot of this paragraph is talking about what she's looking for from manuscript wish list, and she already knows that. So are you adding value by saying, I know you're looking for this and this and this, where for her it's like, yep, I know. um,
Mm.
as opposed to sort of highlighting, I have a piece that I think works well with what you've listed on manuscript wish list, and I might just drop it there. Um, as far as that. The other question, and Angela actually asked this when she submitted her query, was a question about the word count. So first off, for me, I would just put in brackets 42,000 words after the title versus saying it's a little bit over 42,000 words. And 42,000 words is short for a YA. You're typically going to see a YA coming in sort of that 65 to 85,000 words. So this would be much closer to what I would expect to see for more of a middle grade novel. So I do think that is, in terms of a red flag, that's a red flag, particularly because you're going to have a lot of world building. We're going back in time. We're going to be in Pompeii. There's going to be a lot of time and energy spent on sort of telling us and showing us about that word. So I am going to flag to you to do one of two things. So either one, to go back to your manuscript and figure out, have I gotten the biggest bang for that? Have I built this world out as well as I should? Or is this actually possibly a middle grade novel that initially, and I know I have done this before, where we start with one idea, like this is a YA, but is it possible that you've actually written a middle grade? So that's something to consider.
I have one thing, which is, and I hear you, Eileen, that you would take out the unexpected, clever, funny, and twisty descriptor, but that led me, when I was reading subsequent paragraphs, to want to see some of that unexpected, clever, funny, and twisty language or turns of phrase, or somehow reflecting that that's what you've written, because the rest of your query doesn't have that voice. It has a much more serious voice. So I just wanted to see some of that voice, even if you take that out.
Perfect. Well, I think that's a perfect transition. Thank you, Donna. And sort of the next paragraph is a little bit about the story. And I'm curious if either of you have any thoughts about that paragraph.
Well, the first thing that leapt out at me was you're saying she's searching for her biological family and she must travel to the past to save them all from a fatal hereditary disease. So I'm instantly thinking, okay, if this is a fatal hereditary disease, how have they continued their line down to the point where she's born? So I think you have to be specific about what that is, or give some clue as to how that's possible, because otherwise I'm kind of questioning the level of understanding or research around that, just because is it not fatal until you're in your 40s and so you've maybe had a chance to have a family already and therefore pass it down to your ancestors? Or is it that, yeah, I'm not sure. So anyway, that was just something that twigged for me, that I was immediately like, wait, what? And then I was stuck on that and I wasn't processing the other story pieces that came after. So I think for me in that was just something that leapt out, and a tiny small thing, but starting a paragraph with a number, you want to spell it all out. You don't want to list it as a number. Anytime you're going to start a sentence with a number, it should be spelled out. Again, such a small thing, but
before you jump into either of you into another sentence, I had one small thing with that. Well, small. I had one thing with that sentence as well. It's funny. I didn't bump on that same thing. I guess I made an assumption that it wasn't really all of the family, that some of the family survived. So that's how I processed that. But the place where I got hung up was also with that sentence. It's not specific. So you're saying she has to travel to the past to save them from a hereditary disease. And the next sentence, she must journey to ancient Pompeii, which is where I'm assuming her biological family was, but no, it's actually to do something different. And so now I've got a specific, she's going to ancient Pompeii, she's going to the future. I wanted to know, okay, so where is this particular past that she has to go to save her family? Otherwise, I feel kind of like up in the air, like I can see one, but I can't see the other. Does that make sense?
It does, because I think there's a question of, she's traveling to ancient Pompeii to save someone from the eruption. So does that have anything to do with the fatal disease?
Yeah.
Yes or no? So I think that, and then how does someone from the future help with that process? And for me, what I really wanted, and you'll see this as we talk about kind of the rest of the query, is we have one very tiny paragraph about the story. And this is your chance to sell someone on this. So I'm curious to know the stakes. So if she doesn't save her family in the past from the fatal hereditary disease, does that mean she has it? Is she bumping up against a time clock where she may not live very long? And why does saving the family in the past help her find her biological family now? So how are those two things connected? Because um, what are the stakes? Why do I want to go to the past to save people who died a long time ago when they've already died? And so, like, what is it at stake for now? So I'm curious for things like, and again, please excuse me, Angela, because I did a little bit of rewrites, but I'm wondering things like when 17-year-old Layla discovers something happens, she realizes that she must travel back in time to save her family. She journeys to ancient Pompeii to rescue a slave girl who is, and I have that in brackets, before she perishes in the eruptions of Mount Vesuvius. While there, she falls in love with X because of X, and their values clash. She must teach him that his patriarchal ways are not how to win her heart. Does she have to make any choices? Does she have to choose between the slave girl and her boyfriend? What kind of things are happening? What happens if she doesn't do this? Can she just go back to her own time and be like, well, tried to save her, but it didn't quite pan out? So I really want to know why she's there and why this matters. And when she's unable to reach her mission on her own, she enlists the help of who is this relative from the future, and how is it that that person's helping her? So I would really be expanding this kind of one paragraph into a couple of different paragraphs where you're really thinking about what would be on the back of the book. What would be that thing that would make me want to read it? Why do I cheer for her to go back and do that? And that, I think, is what, for me, is missing in this piece. And because I did that, you're going to see that I actually am suggesting that you chop the next two paragraphs, which my colleagues may disagree with, but in terms of telling me about your interest in Pompeii, while that's interesting to me, that's, again, not going to make me want to read a book. So, and that's what the query is to do. So I always go back to the purpose of the query is to make them want to read the book. And while I would want to know that, and that would probably be part of our marketing campaign when we're selling this book, in terms of the point here, I don't think it's necessarily as valuable. And in the same way, the psychologist background, again, is not as interesting to me as the part where you're talking about the protagonist is having to deal with certain issues. And then I want to know why those issues are important to her. So not the feeling of like, these are big, heavy themes, but just really telling me why it matters to her. How did you guys feel about those two paragraphs?
I agreed in terms of you don't need to say that you're interested in this topic because you wouldn't have chosen to write a book about it if you weren't. So I did feel like that was a trade-off in terms of, not communicating more about the story when you do have such a finite number of words to work with. So the other thing was, the assumption is that you've also done a lot of in-depth research. And I feel like highlighting that a Google search of this will turn up X, it feels very topical, even though I know that you've done way more research than just, a Google search and looking for stuff to pull from. I think the risk is that it's very surface kind of a focus, which is the opposite of what a lifetime of fascination with this topic indicates. And so, as Eileen said before, it's not that it's wrong or incorrect to include it. It's just not as powerful as it could be to fit something else in there. I did think that it is useful to say that, you do have experience as a psychologist working with a lot of students, because that does help with a relevant background, but only in a way that, like, there should be a sentence that's woven in with some of the other stuff in the last paragraph about why you're qualified or a good writer. I do think some condensing of some of the end stuff into a shorter paragraph would be beneficial. But yeah, so I liked that it was in there, but again, it just has too much weight right now. I think it needs to be switching the emphasis back to the story. And really, as a psychologist, if you have built really vivid characters and clear conflict, and you're able to show, not tell, that you have a solid understanding of how people are motivated and what the issues for this character emotionally might be, that carries a lot more weight than saying you're trained to understand those things, because they don't actually care what you know. They only care what you can show the reader in the context of that story. So, yeah.
Wow, you're smart. My my response to that was just kind of mirroring back to what I said earlier, which was, once you get into telling the story, and whether or not you share your background, I just want you to give me the tone that you've promised in the unexpected, clever, funny, and twisty. That's a promise you have to keep to me.
I think that's a really great point, because I think tone and feel are part of it. And there is that promise in the beginning, like this is going to be funny and unexpected. And this reads more serious. And one of my concerns is there's the line, the protagonist returns to a time where she has to grapple with issues of the day, such as slavery, patriarchy, assimilation of diverse cultures, and abandoned babies. I mean, that is quite heavy, and it doesn't feel humorous, generally speaking. Abandoned babies are never funny. As well as I worry a little bit that it feels a little after school special, that I'm going to teach a lesson, which you'll often hear in YA is a red flag. And that's because teens have so many people who will be more than happy to teach them a valuable lesson about something. So they're looking again for a great story. And I think it can all come through. I think this is a great concept. I think it's fun. I love time travel. Teens love time travel. I haven't seen a lot of stuff around Pompeii, so I do think it would be a really interesting place to time travel to. But my 100 biggest suggestion to Angela is, tell me more about this story. Tell me about why she needs to go back, why she needs to save her family in the past, what that means for her now. She's going to be doing a very risky thing, and to go back in time to save people who are already going to be dead when she goes back to the present, like, what does that gain her? That, I think, is what's going to compel people to read this book.
I think if you do one exercise for yourself, Angela, before you try to rewrite this query, it will do you a big favor. And that is to sit down and write out, what is it that is the external goal for her? What does she present that she wants? So that might be she wants to save her family from this disease, right? And then you also need to know, what is the internal thing that she really wants? Is it really a sense of belonging and family and home that she's looking for? Like, what is the emotional goal? And then also looking at, okay, now how do the events of the story complicate her journey towards those things? And if you haven't read Story Genius, it's a really great explanation of how those pieces weave together in a story. And as a psychologist, you might find that particularly interesting, just to have that way of explaining how those pieces come together. I just finished rereading that, and it really does ring true, and it does a really good job of delineating questions for you to answer, which, if you can answer them, will help you in how to communicate that then to the person who is out there reading it and looking for a reason to say yes, for you to send the rest of the pages on.
And saying yes is a good thing, because I think there's a really good story to be had here. So thank you so much to Angela for submitting your query. And, if you're interested in rewriting it at some point and wanted us to look again, you can certainly resubmit. And to everyone else, if you've got a query out there, we'd love to take a look at it in the red pencil section. All right. I will see both of you around the Creative Academy, and good luck to everyone with their writing. Bye-bye.
Good luck.